Hi, I'm Fangs. Welcome to the shit show where you can see me, but I can't see you. The materials you'll need for this are going to depend on what you've got around, but for me, I mostly needed some measuring tape, pliers, wire cutters, an awl, and a small screwdriver. If you don't have these, they're easily sourced by swiping them from a handy relative that has tools. I'm going to start off by apologizing if my boots look dusty as fuck anytime they're in the frame. I live in a very rural area with dirt roads, and I wear these almost every day. And contrary to my name, I do go outside. Occasionally. I clean them up for filming, but there seems to be a layer of permadust on there that looks a lot worse on camera than what it actually looks like in real life. My table also looks whack, but it's just because I use an old table that's for exclusively DIY projects, and I'd prefer not to do those on a nicer surface, so it's not very pretty. My camera work might also not be the best since I've never recorded anything like this before, but I'm going to try and at least make it clear what I'm doing with my voiceover in case things aren't as clear visually. Anyways, that's enough background yapping. I measured the area around my boots where the harness was going to go with my measuring tape, so I had an idea of how long I needed to make the pieces so they would fit around this pair. It was roughly 6 inches all around, but there's room to make them a bit more snug if I need to. I pulled out a bunch of stuff I thought I might want to use. I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to do, so I went around and found a reference image, which I'll put up now. I decided to go with something spiky, so I grabbed an old choker thing that I don't wear and started unscrewing and harvesting the spikes from it. Kind of hilarious tangent, but when I visited New York City in a full goth beat, this random crust punk and or random homeless dude, it's kind of hard to tell between them sometimes, looked at me and he was like, "Your spikes on your jacket aren't big enough, I can still grab ya." And he wasn't actually threatening me or doing anything, but ever since then, when I get into some dicey situations when I walk around cities, I just sit there and I'm like, damn, maybe that dude was right. Maybe I do need bigger spikes on my stuff. On another tangent, I decided to start this series because I got tired of bitching about DIY kind of dying out in alternative scenes with younger people, and decided to be the change I wanted to see in the world. I don't know if anything I put out in this endeavor will actually be any good, but hopefully it gives people the idea to start making their own stuff out of the things that they have. I am a perpetually broke fucker, so I have a stash of old accessories and stuff I can pull parts from to make new stuff with. I save and collect a whole bunch of stuff for this endeavor, and I hate throwing out things I think might be useful. So if you see me on an episode of Hoarders in like 20 years, you'll know how I ended up there. I think buying stuff from big corporations that profit off our subcultures is lame, so I love flexing the fact that I can make random shit out of other random shit that I have lying around. It's hard to initially get into the mindset of looking at stuff you have and realizing if you want to take it apart, you can just do that, but it takes practice. The good thing about it is that if something doesn't work out, you can just take it apart and try again, or use those materials for something else unless you fuck it up massively. Once I had all my spikes harvested, I pulled out some random harnesses I have that I don't wear and started seeing if maybe they'd work for this. I've never had anything like that fit me out of the box without massive customization on my part, and I've never really been super big into wearing a lot of fetish stuff because I tend to tweak the fuck out and get really uncomfortable when anybody sexualizes me, so the pleather strips from the stuff I had seemed like a good way to repurpose those materials. They aren't good, and I don't usually recommend pleather if you have access to actual leather, but like I said, I don't like throwing away stuff I think I can use. I don't have a rivet remover, so I had to carefully pry them out from the strips with my pliers, which was fairly tedious. After that was done, I made sure the spikes I had would actually fit into the holes the rivets left, and thankfully they did. I took 4 strips out of the harness, as well as 4 rings to connect everything together. I fit the pieces around my boots to see if they'd work, and they thankfully did, though they may need a little bit of adjustment. I went looking around for a marker or anything I could use to mark my strips for where to poke in the points with the awl to put the spikes, but I ended up just eyeballing the halfway points. If you're smarter than me, you'll have something like that handy, but I personally am not too fussed about the outcome of this. Once my spikes were in place, I fit them over the boots again to see how they would look. I don't have any rivets like I thought I might, so I ended up holding the rings together with some extra spikes. I don't know if that looks cool or goofy, but it was my best idea for now. The last step is adding the chain part to the bottom. I wasn't sure if I had any decent chains for this, but I found something that would work in my stash. Otherwise, if you ever need chains, Home Depot is probably the best place to go. After measuring the length I needed, I used my wire cutters and pliers to pry them apart so I could connect them. I initially used some pretty weak jump rings I had in order to test the fit and figured they weren't going to work very well, so I ended up changing them out to be something that would hold up better in the long term. Instead of putting a buckle on the back, I opted for attaching a belt hook to the chain part and attaching them that way so they'd look a little bit more seamless. This ended up being kind of tedious since the measurements needed to be more precise, but if I wanted to adjust these in the future, I can just do that. I only filmed myself making one harness because the process to make the other one is exactly the same steps as the first. All in all, this took maybe a couple hours out of my day to do. After I finished everything and tried to get decent film shots of my boots, my camera decided to tell me to go fuck myself, and it only wanted to record in night vision no matter what I did. Probably because the lighting on my floor is absolute garbage. I don't have many good spots around me or in my house to film or take photos, but I'll try to include at least some okay-ish pictures since my camera didn't want to cooperate. Hopefully you at least have an idea of what I was trying to get across. Sorry if this was absolute hot garbage and made absolutely 0 sense. Anyway, I gotta go wash the probable lead from the cheap-ass materials off my hands. I'm not trying to die that early.